Okay, so I suggest let's start right away, not too late. So the topic of our session here is Europe's hegemon, the past, present, and future of German power. I guess the past dimension won't be here because Odette Heilbronner, who was supposed originally to be with us, could not make it. But I think it's still very interesting, even if we only have two, because so we have a little bit more time for discussion, to listen to two presentations about a subject where, I mean, I think it's maybe the most timely one, I would say, actually, these days. I mean, it's just already a common phrase to insist on the 100 billion euros that had been invested in German hard power, and where not only Israeli gas is being exported to Germany, also Israeli weapons, I mean, to add to the irony. So Ukraine has really shuffled also the image of Germany within and from without, with a question of how much it will be able to stand up beyond soft power to its position of economic world power. So German leadership is really challenged on the topic. And within the country, from the EU, from the outside, I think so far navigating in the Ukraine crisis as far as all the other countries as well. And soft power, which is true, has been really the pillar of the modern Germany after 45. So we will hear two presentations. The first one by Dr. Mitrani. Is it friendship? An analysis of contemporary German-Israeli relations. She is a lecturer at the Political Studies Department at Ilan University. Her research focuses on discursive perspectives to the study of international relations and the application of computerized text analysis methods for examining international identity and societal interaction between states. She is leading a 3-year research project funded by the Israeli Science Foundation, which examines patterns of relations between states based on computerized analysis of states' speeches in the United Nations General Assembly. And now you will speak about German-Israeli relations.
Hi, good afternoon to everyone. The post-lunch session is always the most difficult one, so thank you for bearing with us. And thank you for asking me to present this paper, which I wrote in collaboration with Felix Bernskotter from SOAS University of London, and was published a few months ago in IASEI. And our paper is entitled, Is it Friendship? An Analysis of Contemporary Israel-German Relations. And the title of the paper is quite telling. What we do there is to examine the contemporary relationship between Israel and Germany, and specifically whether this relationship can be deemed as a friendship. And this paper started as a casual conversation between Felix and I 6 years ago in a workshop that we both participated in the Hebrew Youth. And the workshop coincided with the honorary doctoral ceremony in which Frank-Walter Steinmeier, then Germany's foreign minister, gave a speech as one of the recipients of the honorary doctoral. And we had him talk and noticed that he keeps referring to the relationship between Israel and Germany as friendship. So as Felix is German in nationality and a scholar that focuses on the concept of international friendship, and I'm Israeli in nationality and a scholar that focuses on discourse and rhetoric, we engaged in a conversation that its main theme was, is it indeed friendship? So this is the question that this paper stems from, and we treat this question from two different perspectives. First, theoretical, we ask what makes a friendship, and specifically we ask, is defining a relationship or talking about a relationship as a friendship renders it as a friendship? And our second perspective is empirical, and given that there are very, very, very few accounts on the contemporary relationship between Israel and Germany, we ask, does the contemporary relationship meet the theoretical criteria of interstate friendship? To make a long story short, the answer that we offer to this question in our paper is no, or at least not yet. But it's not really the gist of the paper or of the research we took in its context, because I think that what this paper really concerns and what it really reveals is the role that the future, and specifically visions of the future, play in defining relationships in general and friendship in particular. So, as we all know, the Israeli-German relationship is often seen as a special relationship, having emerged out of the ashes of the Second World War and the Holocaust. Political relations between these two states are widely seen as having successfully undergone a process of reconciliation that starts with the reparation agreement in 1952. A key feature of this post-war relationship is the German public and financial support of Israel, usually understood as a constant attempt to pay off an historical debt in exchange for rehabilitation and recognition of Germany as a good state, or as we say it in the paper, as a normal state. In this paper, we simply ask what comes after reconciliation and whether contemporary German-Israeli relationship have reached the stage of friendship, a relationship that is structured by care rather than by guilt. To answer this question, we first present a theoretical framework of interstate friendship that we define and theorize as a bond of shared memory and vision that enable a common orientation towards the past and the future that both sides are committed to invest in. And we apply this framework on the Israeli-German case and examine the sharedness of the memory and of the Holocaust and the future vision of the never again maxim, which is manifested, we argue, in a shared commitment to a secure Israel in the land of Israel. What we find, nevertheless, is a strong evidence for a shared memory of the past, but also for significant gaps in the shared vision of the future, concluding that relations between the states still fall short of friendship. However, we stress the potential of such a relationship and highlights the need to better understand the process of building friendship and the hurdles it involves, especially if one considers, as we do, that German-Israeli relations seem to have reached a juncture that requires both states and the new governments, well, maybe new government, to redefine where do we go from here. So let me elaborate a bit about our course of research. The starting point of what we term the contemporary phase is the end of the Cold War and the German unification, which yielded, especially after the First Gulf War, intensified diplomatic interactions of various kinds. These, especially after the elections of Angela Merkel, were accompanied by a significant increase in friendship rhetoric, with political leaders on both sides calling the positive development of relations a miracle and publicly emphasizing the friendship between the two states at every formal encounter. I read every diplomatic interaction, every diplomatic speech between the two states. Everyone calls it a friendship. I have later I'll tell you what they do not do. To assess whether this trajectory and associated practices mean that Germany and Israel have now formed a friendship, we then offer a conceptual account of friendship as the next step of reconciliation processes. Namely, we argue that friendship takes place after the reconciliation process ends and the conditions are right to switch emotions of guilt with emotions of care. Our conceptualization of friendship sees friendship as an existential bond grounded in the formulation of an identification with a shared history and shared visions of the future to which both parties are cognitively and emotionally attached. The shared quality means that both sides are part of and see each other within past and future central to the respective national biographies. Based on this framework, we evaluate whether contemporary relations between Germany and Israel qualify as a friendship by analyzing whether they develop a shared understanding of being in time, both in the past and both in the future. Specifically, it asks us to assess whether the two governments are formulated and invested in shared past and shared futures that can explain German support in terms of care. A friendship cannot be said to exist if we find fundamentals and persistent gaps and disagreements over the content of memory, of the contents of future vision, and how to invest in them. Our empirical analysis, based on interviews with practitioners and diplomats in both sides, and on content analysis of mainly speeches by political leaders, shows that eventually there is an agreement between the two states over the memory of the past. specifically the memory of the Holocaust and the main lessons drawn from this memory. Both sides formulate these lessons with a shared commitment to two main maxims: never forget, the intent to keep the shared memory alive, and never again, namely the intent to prevent the possibility of another Holocaust, and more generally, the responsibility to protect and support Jewish life in the land/nation, with the disagreement of Israel. However, beyond the broad agreement over the memory of the past, each state has formulated and embraced a contrasting set of lessons regarding the vision of the future. These lessons have become ingrained in their national identities and state practices. In Germany, two broad lessons are meant to prevent a return to the aggressive past. First, the conviction that hypernationalism and unilateral action are dangerous. Consequently, foreign policy should be conducted through cooperation in multilateral institutions and managed through integration and the sharing of sovereignty. Second, the view that military force is not a desirable foreign policy instrument because of both its violent nature and its inability to solve political problems. Primacy should be placed on diplomacy, trade, and development aid, capturing the notion of Germany as a civilian power. In Israel, on the other hand, where the memory of the Holocaust serves as a constant warning intended with seemingly perpetual security problems, governments have drawn two related lessons, completely contradicting to the German one, that are also embedded in the Zionist thought. First, the conviction that the Jewish people cannot rely on others for protection, and hence must find refuge in an independent and sovereign state capable of defending itself. Second, the view that military might is central to provide the protection, and those constant military readiness and superiority are essential to ensure the survival of the Jewish people. We claim that the shared memory of the Holocaust, made possible by meeting in the experience space of the victims, lead both governments to commit to the utopia of a secure Israel, expressed in vision of Israel as a military power and Israel as peace, and to stress democracy as a shared ideal. As such, the potential for a friendly bond exists. However, at a closer look, our analysis noted how the two sides relate to the shared memory by contrasting it with the present or by seeing it as ever present. I'll elaborate. We identify a Germany committed to separate itself from its Nazi past, and an Israel facing the Holocaust as an ever-present possibility. This difference in time and the lesson formulated through it played out in significant disagreements over the concrete formulation of the vision of a secure Israel. Berlin's support of Israel as a military power compromises its self-image of civilian power and remains anchored in historical views. And there are tensions between the two governments regarding the vision of Israel as peace, which spill over into the vision of Israel as democracy. In those cases, we found little evidence of constructive dialogue, but rather complaints and frustrations that were increasingly expressed openly. While the German government's embrace of responsibility for the fate of the Jewish people contains a noticeable element of care appreciated on the Israeli side, Berlin's claim to voice in shaping the meaning of Israel's security, peace, and democracy appear to conflict with the Zionist determination of never again being in a situation where others decide over our future. As such, the shared memory keeps alive historical role identities of perpetrators and victims and mandates a secure Israel as an utopia in which Germany must invest, yet the content of which it cannot shape. Up to a point, this is a convenience for both sides. The Israeli government benefits from a constellation in which Berlin's support is grounded in historical debt that cannot be paid off. And the German government can continue to contrast its identity of contemporary German against the historical Nazi state. Yet, all of our interviewees, we had around like 20, stress the importance of a shared vision, noting that the memory of the Holocaust alone won't be sufficient to hold the two states together. In this respect, both sides are aware that a relationship based on the past-oriented guilt is less sustainable than one based on a future-oriented one. Caring about a shared future needs to go beyond one side incorporating the future of the other in its biographical narrative. One would expect a reciprocal commitment by the Israel government to a vision of a secure Germany or Germany in peace, including the vision of an integrated Europe as a central element of Germany's biographical narrative. We found little evidence for such a commitment, although an assessment lies outside the scope of this phase of our paper. What is clear is that interpreting the shared never again maxim into a positive vision in which both sides see and treat each other as equals still requires much political effort. Thank you.
Thank you. So is it friendship?
No, yes, not yet.
Well, the puzzle.
Well, it's funny because I wrote it with a German partner, and he was like, "No," and I was like, "Not yet."
Well, thank you very much. This reminds me just in a German high-ranking diplomat said in a closed discussion that we believe that we have a different or better idea of what's in Israel's best interest.
So
that's the friendship, a patronizing narrative.
Exactly. And I had an interview with a former Israeli diplomat that said Germany thought that she can tell us how to build a future, and we said never again.
But we can, I mean, are there immediate?
I think it will be better because then we remember that.
Okay, so that's fine with you, and that will, okay. Yeah.
So yes, so excellent. Thank you so much. It was really interesting. So the first question would be the concept of friendship. So how did you define it? I mean, you said for our purposes, and you repeatedly twice, we defined it like that. But is it so what kind of a definition is that? Is it the only definition possible for two states friendship? Can it be that they don't have a shared past, but they have a common vision for the future? Can it be that they have a shared past and not common vision, as apparently Israel and Germany had, and still define friendship? So it's an interesting prism that you give us, but I ask myself whether it's defined for the purpose by you, for the purpose of the paper, or there is literature support.
So there is a burgeoning literature on interstate friendship that starts around 2005, 8, 9, like something like that.
So
There are more and more scholars that treat this concept. Felix, my partner, is one of the pioneers in the field, and actually the main case studies are Germany and France, and US, Germany, US and the UK. Both, to some extent, are examples of relationship that are that are a product of reconciliation, even if it was in the 18th century, right? In the case of the UK and the US. So there is a literature. It draws from sociological understanding of friendship and also from philosophical writing. It goes back to Aristotle, seriously, and I'm not an expert. What we try to do here theoretically is to say two things. Calling a relationship a friendship is not enough. Like the fact that diplomats or political leaders in both sides say there is a friendship doesn't render it as a true friendship. And I'll tell you what's interesting, because I read every speech ever, and we found so many references to the relationship is friendship. And we found so many references that Germany is a friend of Israel, and we didn't find a single reference that Israel is a friend of Germany. And I told it to one of the Israeli diplomats. He said, "No way." I told him, "Yes way." And I'll show you my Excel that actually counts who calls whom a friend, and Israel, not like no Israeli politician and not German politician, never say that Israel is a friend of Germany. Only Germany is a friend of Israel. And we said, can it be like unilateral friendship? That's very weird. So this is about friendship. And what we're going to do here is to say, I think that our theoretical bottom line, which I didn't go in length, is that friendship is not a condition, it's a process. Like you need to make it and you need to maintain it. So you can't cut a point in time and say, are we friends? Yes. And now, are we friends? No. Like, and we argue theoretically that, and yes, we come from this post-conflict relationship, that when two nations or two states are in a post-conflict relationship, and we have so many literature on reconciliation, and the consolidation of reconciliation. So we offer friendship at the next stage, but it's not like we're not moving. There's a process of making it. It doesn't necessarily, that's why we said not yet, because it doesn't necessarily succeed, but there's maybe an attempt to change to the next stage.
Well, now, just to follow up with the so the next thing is that, so you say that you covered the interviews and you have a quantitative analysis. The aspect that, can it be that the interviews are not the right place to go? So maybe, you know, if you check how Germany send money to Israel, how they, if they will send us the weapons, if they vote for us in the UN, so they maybe, so, and again, I don't know how, whether it has to be reciprocal or one-way straight, but if they do, so the question, you know, when you say you love me, whether it's more important that you say you love me or you show me that you do love me, that's by deeds, so not by saying. So
I think that the interviews were important here for two reasons. First, like if we only measured support, well, that's a really asymmetrical relationship. Like German support, then that's also one of the hurdles of calling it friendship. German support of Israel, financial, public, political, whatever, like you cannot even compare it to Israel support of Germany. Like, well, Israel doesn't really support Germany anything, because Israel doesn't really support anyone, by the way. It's not like it is part of our, you know, national identity. We only take care of ourselves, and that's
what they all want to take care of us.
Exactly. No, not necessarily, but yeah. And so that's the first thing. The second thing, and again, it goes back to our theoretical framework, is that asking people to define is important, because we want to know if at some point German support to Israel shifts from being based on guilt to being based on care. Like, it's not because we need to pay off our terrible actions in World War II. That's why we support you. It's because we are friends and we care about you, and friends care. Okay, friends care about each other. Yeah.
So what was the answer?
No.
No?
Well, it depends who you ask. What I can say that there was really huge differences between interviewing German practitioners and Israeli practitioners. And like the bottom line was with German practitioners, where the, how do you say, the sand clock, like we are in the last like range, like we are about, like we can't do it anymore. Like, we are patient, we give you support, we try to stand by you, but you are pushing it, people. Like
the Israeli side pushes it.
Yes.
So.
And we did the interviews in 2016 to 2017. It was a hardcore time. I mean, Israel banned the German NGOs. We had like the national law, like all this stuff that were completely contradictory to the German identity.
Maybe I'm missing something. Yeah. So, okay, I'm not the academician, I'm from the Ministry of Finance. But, you know, when I was very young, I learned that countries have interests. They don't have feelings. So, I mean, you're trying to maybe change the nature of foreign invasion. Okay, I understand the importance of speeches, but as somebody who wrote many speeches for many people, I know that, you know, basically it's dependent on the person who writes it. And tomorrow I can go back to my office and write a speech and say, Israel is different of Germany. It doesn't mean that it's going to be true, just that I got something out of it.
So I don't want to be rude. Yeah. And I really appreciate. I really appreciate your practitioner outlook. But as someone that analyzed thousands of speeches, it's not really true. Because at the end of the day, you can most of the time, because it's a really different conversation. I'm using a computer to analyze speeches. The computer cannot differentiate different writers of speeches, because states reiterate the same values, the same views. They have changed, but the core of speeches, the core of discourse is very, very constant. It's not dynamic. It's almost independent of who writes it. For several reasons, I can talk about it later. It's not related to this. Second, interest versus feelings. I won't go in length in theory, but I think that for the past 30, 35 years in our theory, it became more and more conventional to realize that states are social actors. We can debate if the people that lead them are the social actors or the state as an entity is a social actors, but it's a social actor. It is motivated by social facts, by norms, by values, by the need to be part of a greater we, by the need to take part in the class of being a state. States want to be normal. Not only, it's not separated from their interest, but it's entwined with their interest. So we don't do, or it's like scholars like me that take more from sociological perspective, we don't do anymore this separation of interest and blah, blah, sociological values. They are entwined. And so I'm just saying, at the end of the day, there is importance, there's great importance, especially if you know, and that's your job, right? International relations are so many words, like that's what you do, like you talk, you write words. So
Mickey and you over there, yeah.
Okay. I think, well, when we speak about the emphasizing of this friendship element from German side vis-a-vis the Israeli side, it is, in my opinion, it's not only a question of guilt, it's a question also of realpolitik, because when you claim that you are dealing with a friend, you can allow yourself to say also very, very critical things. And this is exactly what Germany wants to do. And on the other hand, what Israel doesn't like. So this is also a reason why Israel you never found that Israel called Germany a friend. Very clear. This is one remark. Second remark, you in your analysis mentioned the German vis-a-vis the Israeli attitude regarding using of military force and so on and so on. Now, I wonder whether there is a shift going on also in German society now because of the Ukraine-Russia war. I stayed for 2 months now in Berlin, and in the last month, it's unbelievable. The politicians, even from the Green Party, from left-wing, from the Social Democratic Party, they're so patriotic. I don't know how to call it. Yeah. This is also something that has to be taken into consideration. I suppose that you did your research before the
way before.
Okay.
Yeah, I was just wondering if you could elaborate a little bit on the interviews to understand the results a bit better, like who were the people that you interviewed from both countries?
So basically we did like these semi-structured interviews with current and former diplomats, and also with people that took part in civil society relationship between the two states that kind of foster the relationship at the civil level and not only at the state level, and also with some media correspondents that were super familiar with the relationship. Yeah, but I think that we covered in terms of practitioners, like the main people that were involved in the relationship for the past 30 or 40 years in both sides.
Yeah.
It's, it's a researcher interest of mine. It's not it's a big thing to publish, and many research has been done on Germany and even on friendship. So how did you spell the article? What is, if you can really be focused on your theoretical as well empirical contribution? How did you, because many books were written on German media. What is the added value, very focused added value?
We didn't find a single account except one book of Shimon Stein from 2011 on the contemporary Israeli-German relationship. Nothing. I found not many, but I found some on the establishment of the relationship. But after 1991, I didn't find anything, something about information like intelligent relationship, but nothing. And we're like,
PhD by
That-
people Chalet.
yeah, and so we found another PhD in SOAS, Daniel, which finished his PhD more or less when we started working on the project. I found a thesis in Oxford, like
It's
nothing.
weird because it's the taken for granted assumption that Israel and Germany are friends, and there's nothing, there's any puzzle in the relationship, maybe.
Yeah, and also, and theoretically, I think that our selling point was, I didn't elaborate it like in this presentation, but like the gap between like when a friendship becomes a friendship. Even if I say, Tal, I'm your friend, that it makes us friends. And what's more important, and I'm relating to your comment, which I agree with it a lot. What are the implications? What are the practical implications? If we are friends, what does it mean? Does it mean that I can tell you, hey, you cannot put an embargo on German NGOs of operating in the Palestinian territories, or I can. So we've used, like, the paper is kind of tailored to give both theoretical and empirical, but also to nurture each other. Like we use the easiest case study to examine, can we shift our theoretical understanding of friendship from being a condition to being a process, like of making.
Yeah, a lot. I mean, I just wrote a chapter on Israel's foreign policy, these years of Germany from 1974 until today. So, and you're right, there is really not much substantial literature on that. But my guideline, and I think this is very challenging. I also quote your article there because it's really one of these important things. What you have shown, I think it's about it's right, a declarative level, talking about friendship, mentioning it, and procedure. And there is one other thing in the mutual perception that is very interesting here, and I think it matches when you also say friendship has to be somehow earned and developed. Because you will hear Germans, when they refer to the relations with Israel, they love to use the word miracle, which is never, ever used by the Israeli side for a good reason, because Israeli diplomat says, come on, this is an evolutive process with many ups and many downs, and it's really good that we managed to create, to be at a certain stage in a process, but definitely not the miracle. So you have the same thing here, the friendship is thrown in and the miracle. And I think what you just said, Miki, it's in that sense, you could also say that, I mean, Israel gives even this card then to Germany to let it be called a friend. So it is in a way a both direction.
Yeah, we argue that Israel doesn't want Germany. It doesn't want to be a friend of Germany because the consequences of the implications will be too hard. It's really convenient for us, as Israel, to keep this guilt-based, past-based relationship. But what we also argue that it can't last forever. Like at some point, and if there won't be effort in creating content, like one of the diplomats we talked about said, it was 2017, right? That for the past 2 or 3 years, there is a clear, explicit effort to do what the equal diversification. Like to create cooperations on areas that are normal, development, agriculture, whatever. And we refer to it in the paper and saying, well, that doesn't normalize the relationship. It's just like a tactic of avoidance because we don't want to treat this huge elephant in the room, saying, what are we? Like what is the social relationship are based upon?
Okay, well, this brings us really to the question whether this is something already from the past and things have changed now in the light of the recent developments. So our next speaker is going to be Yeshua Arsenault. He wrote together with Honig a paper.
It's a work in progress.
It's a work in progress. The evolution of Germany's soft power policies in the Middle East. I promised to Honig to present him at least briefly. He's an associate professor of international relations at Tokyo International University. and he was also a lecturer at Tel Aviv University and at York University. And he is interested in the changing geopolitical standing of Israel in Europe in light of its economic miracle and Middle East developments. And Yoshua Arsenault recently earned his PhD in political science from the School of Political Science, Government and International Relations at Tel Aviv University. And he's currently working on Israel-Europe relations, among other research, the evolution of international relations of the Middle East and the role and impact of the environment in great power politics. Please.
Thank you. I'm amazed that you got my last name right,
I'm a French speaker.
as were my ancestors. Okay, so this is a paper. This is really a work in progress. So my presentation won't be quite as clean as Moore's here. Let's see if it's shown on the road here. Got this here. I'm going to talk about 4 things in the course of this presentation. First, I'll talk about what do we mean by soft power and German soft power in the Middle East. Second, what sort of forces are out there that might impact a state like Germany that has a very strong soft power outlook to change that outlook. Third, I'll ask whether or not the invasion of Ukraine has really been the watershed, which is kind of a bad translation of the word Zeitenwende, changing over times. Is it really changing? And lastly, speculate a little bit about the near future, what might be going on. So, got this here. Hold on. So I trust that everyone's familiar with the concept of soft power built by Joseph Nye as a form of influence in international relations that's gained by admiration and attraction and persuasion. Usually people, when they talk about soft power, they kind of mean cultural appeal, ideology. Some also use it as a catch-all for everything non-military, but that's not quite correct. In terms of Germany, there's quite a long history of development of soft power. As we know, it's one of the, if not the main leader in soft power influence today. It began after World War II as a result of the crimes of World War II and the Holocaust. Germany had to remake its image, sort of regain entry into the community of states. And part of this was this humanitarian approach, and helping other states with the redevelopment. This was a foundation of German-Israeli relations for quite a long time, as Moore mentioned. But more recently, since the 1980s, somebody talking? Okay, sorry. But since the 1980s, Germany really took a more international stance in terms of branding itself as this humanitarian actor dedicated to peaceful resolution of conflicts. And we saw more support towards Palestine appearing from the 1980s onward. One could argue that was probably a overall trend of liberalization in Europe at the time. I think the UK Labour Party also switched the view in that time. Since unification, that soft power image has only been reinforced. And that's what Angela Merkel's most known for. And what does it mean though? What does this mean on the Middle East being this leader in humanitarianism, support, peaceful conflict resolution? It means supporting both sides in the Israeli conflict. Israel where it needs, Palestine where it needs. In terms of support for Palestine, it's just all money coming for development, going both into basic infrastructure, but that also filters into local education and cultural institutions. and also a lot of support from German civil society for all these NGOs, which I guess we're talking about downstairs, so I won't go into it here. And also we've seen, as some have noted already, that Germany's getting a little frustrated at Israel, which it didn't do so much in the past, especially regarding settlements, not making progress. And that's, let's see that. So what can limit soft power like this? What can limit this dedicated approach? In IR, in realist IR, which is where I sit, we talk about several different kinds of factors. We talk about individual factors having to do with leaders. We can talk about domestic factors, that is to say pressures in the states that are inside the state that are affecting the leadership's decision. And last but not least, international events which states are forced to react to. I'm going to talk about mostly the second and third elements, the domestic and international factors. For Germany, there's been a couple of tests even before Putin's invasion of the Ukraine over whether soft power approach and the openness and leadership of the EU is really the way to go. The first test was the migration crisis, of which Angela Merkel was perhaps the star. But there was also of course, there was a downside to that. Everybody knows about the rise in nationalism. The AfD came out of nowhere and became the third largest party in the Bundestag. Number of terrorist attacks in Germany, also caused by radical elements from within some of these migrant groups or those communicating with the Middle East. And also just a degree of domestic opposition to what was going on. People wondered who's going to pay for this, what's it going to do to us. But overall, you didn't see a change in approach yet. I think it's going to remain the same. So that brings us to the real watershed moments, the Putin's invasion of the Ukraine. I want to linger for a minute on the speech Olaf Scholz made on February 27th, just 3 days after the invasion, because he said a couple really significant things, both in terms of the international system and both about what Germany's supposed to be doing as time goes forward. You know, he uses the word Zeitenwende several times. Describe what has happened, which means in English they say watershed, but that's kind of a passive term. Really what we're talking about is an inflection point, something big happening that's changing the course of what's going on. The world is not the same as it used to be. He also does not want to says that he doesn't want to let Putin get away with what he's doing, and that's he's not suitable as a diplomatic partner, which is one of Germany's main soft power tools. So that's useless. But at the same time, he dedicated to peacefully solving conflicts if possible. And he's talking about this in terms of the EU. He mentions European security a number of times, doesn't mention German security. It's clear that he wants to be a leader in this situation that is drastically changing. So what are the implications for this? Well, Russian invasions really put Germany in a bind because, as I mentioned, all the soft power instruments don't really seem to work against someone like Putin. Scholz mentioned that Germany needed to act to rein in Putin, but you can't do that just by talking. You need to do stuff. You need to act. So the implication is that Germany needs to redress its balance between hard military power, of which there's been very, very little since the World War II, and soft power, which there's immense of. There needs to be some sort of rebalancing. How do you do this? And has Germany done that? Not really. There are a lot of political allies and even opponents of Schultz interpreted his speech as indeed a critical turning point, and that Germany was going to be active in assisting Ukraine and other states now threatened by Russia. And while many billions of euros have flowed towards Ukraine, this doesn't include any offensive weapons, the Leopard tanks, which Ukraine desperately wants. And so this is falling short of expectations. We claim to want to increase the defense budget to more than 2% of the GDP, but that's not happening. And he's repeatedly delaying sending tanks to Ukraine and other heavy weapons. In fact, the opposition party, CSU, keeps trying to bring a vote into the Bundestag to force the parliament to decide on it, but his allies keep sending it back to committee. There's a fear if they have to vote on this, it could very well damage his government. So there's domestic pressure within Germany, in addition to the international pressure to act for the sake of Europe's safety. German politicians and even society, to a large extent, are sort of expecting him to step up. And this hasn't happened. A poll from Der Spiegel from late April or May found that 65% did not think Schultz was being a strong leader. They responded, not really or not at all. So the question remains is, why is there this reluctance to not come to Ukraine's help, to not be the leader? And it's fairly obvious. Ukraine's complaining about abstract fears of the Germans about military, well, anything concerned with military. And that exactly is the problem, is that Germany developed a strategic culture after World War II based on peaceful soft power, that it could pursue its interests through peaceful means, through nonviolent means. And it was very successful at this. We developed its economy, became one of the core members of the EU, enjoys enormous influence also in the Middle East. But these things change slowly. Strategic cultures are notoriously ingrained in difficult change, barring extreme outside events. So what does this mean for the future? Well, what Germany could try to do is achieve sort of a balanced approach, still remain in soft power, but add military means to it. Sort of this combination Joseph Nye refers to as smart power. Being a leader against Russia without over-militarizing. Of course, that risks Robert Jervis war spiral to war, but that just comes with the territory. We can't sit and do nothing. So it seems to me the best way forward would be to pursue a balanced approach like that.
If you want to have some discussion.
Yeah, that's about all I have to say about that. But also one last point, it does depend on a lot of future developments, both how the war in Russia goes, if there's stagnation or escalation, how things in the Middle East are, especially when we're talking about German soft power in the Middle East as it pertains to Israel and Palestine. Does Israel side with, be closer to Europe? Does it stay neutral? Does it, stay neutral with respect to Ukraine, Russia? Does it try to please Russia?
Thank you.
Oh, let's say about that.
I mean, what is interesting that somehow the Yugoslavian war gets kind of forgotten in the development. Everyone kind of puts it aside. So there was already a war in Europe in the 90s when we say since 45, nothing had happened. And with German support, which at the time, in fact, it was the Greens that have made a big leap in favor of military intervention, which
They have
was
done
at
so
the
also
time.
recently.
Exactly. So, but just to remind, yeah, please.
Well, I think that we should divide or differentiate between two things. As far as Germany support Ukraine, it is interrelated, very much interrelated with NATO. Okay, so
Yes.
you can talk about Germany's security policy with as not embedded within the more organizational security policy, and also NATO vis-a-vis Ukraine. And I follow NATO discourse. It is us. Yeah, they want to. They brought back some of the Cold War discourse in order to get Russia and Putin, but they eventually their help, NATO's help is indirect. Indirect, it will never be direct unless one of NATO member countries will be attacked. Okay, yes. So Germany is with them. This is one thing. So Germany cannot be more assertive than NATO. And this is where NATO is going. NATO have been changing a lot since the 90s. Even though she intervened in Kosovo, even though she helped in Libya, it was for other matters. It was humanitarian intervention, military intervention. So the NATO strategic concept changed dramatically. Putin now pushes NATO to change again strategic concept, but then again it didn't really change. They stay very much into Article 5. We don't react unless you put in Russia invade one of the member countries, will not happen. And this is one thing. The second thing is, well, we saw that. I'm not a specialist, I didn't write about it, but I know it because I'm dealing with European security in my research. And Germany started to change its strategic concept and attitude since the 90s. Her support with in Kosovo, in NATO intervention in Kosovo was suited, but it was humanitarian intervention. 10 years later, in Libya, Germany was abstained. NATO intervened or helped without Germany's support. And also NATO intervention in Afghanistan was operationalized without the really involvement of Germany. As far as I know, Germany only sent logistic help in Afghanistan. That's all. But again, we saw that Germany is willing to consider, smart power, using soft power as well as more harsh, diplomatic actions. But this is, what is happening with regards to German perception using military force is concerned with what is happening in Europe. I don't see how it will affect Germany's attitude toward the Middle East. As far as I see, Germany will continue to express soft power in the Middle East, as part of its identity. So I can't see how.
That was also sort of my conclusion. I didn't really talk about it. Yeah.
Okay. So I'm wondering, what is the puzzle here, you know, in terms of research? What is the puzzle here? Why would we like to investigate or research how the war in Ukraine will affect Germany's soft power in the Middle East? You know, what is the puzzle here? This is the title of the research of
Yes.
our, this is the main question that you know, one should ask.
Yes.
I want to complement to that question, a few other questions also. I mean, did you, of course, there is Ukraine and Russia, but on the global plan also there is China, which is maybe a bigger challenge in the future, at least for the Americans, probably also for the Germans and other Europeans. Not only on the technology field, but also on, I mean, we're talking about Taiwan, we're talking about also security issues, which might influence Germany and Europe. So this is one question. Second question, I mean, when you talk about Germany moving from soft power to hard power, a lot of talk is, of course, about the German-French couple, because I mean, French does have a strong army, including, you know, destroyers and
Also
nuclear weapons and other things. Actually, talking about the nuclear, you see that there is a disagreement also between Germany and France on many issues concerning energy, and certainly also concerning security. Actually, I don't know if you saw yesterday, there was a very interesting article, I think it was yesterday in Le Monde by Sylvie Kaufmann, talking about the problems in the German-French couple. And she was talking about China, the fact that Macron wanted to go with Schultz to Beijing, but Schultz said, no, I'm going to go alone with 200 businessmen, mainly for economic reasons, but also about the nuclear, about other issues, about Macron's propositions on security, which Schultz is not really completely embracing, including his Prague speech. He didn't really embrace the French ideas on security. So she was analyzing that the situation of the French-German couple is not so good, but I don't know, maybe you have another perception. But it's very hard to think, for me at least, about moving, and there is a Zeitwende for sure. But I mean, for the Zeitwende to really, for the Germans really to be able to confront that, I mean, the couple with France is very important. Of course, the EU, NATO, I believe, but also the EU. Can they bring through this couple? So in this multipolar world, I mean, are you looking also at these questions? Because Russian trade is important, but it's not the only factor.
We hadn't yet arrived to considering China, although that's obviously very important. Now we're looking more at simply how the shock of the Russian invasion would force a reconsider.
I mean, I think what is really puzzling, in fact, having Germany putting a lot in advance always economic interests in dealing with China, in dealing also with Iran. What is interesting with Russia, where you could argue it is pretty close geographically and a huge power, that there suddenly you had this Zeitenwende. If you're looking for a puzzle, I would place it there, because Germany could have, after all, also said, well, because Germany is going to lose economic interests with Russia, and the same interest that it upheld, let's say with China or with Iran, by not going all the way, suddenly with Russia, which is much closer and big, they decided to confront this. And this is, for me, remains a kind of a puzzle right now. Even if it might be a part of an evolutionary process after many things.
Maybe part of the answer is some European story. And
yeah.
I mean, that's, connected to the Middle East and what you were saying, whether it's going to be projected to the Middle East, because, that's a problem we have many times with the EU and others, they have different the point of view.
Different measures of
judging.
judging.
When it comes to European soil and when it comes to Middle Eastern soil.
Well, Mo has to leave quickly also.
Yeah.
We are, if there is You
I
want to
don't need to
relate
leave
more,
as
you
well,
want to
so
say
you're free to
something?
talk to me.
Because then we are sticking with our time. I don't know whether the others come to this room or
we
not.
need to come.
If there, you want to say something, we can continue for a few minutes.
Thank you
It's
very
it's
much.
a
for
big
your
issue,
comments.
you know, the war in Ukraine, Germany stand on it. But you need to, you know, be more focused about the connection with the Middle East.
Yes.
I want to add the nuclear element,
Of course.
especially in recent days, there's a lot of talk about the, especially we talk about hard power. I mean, most of the things that you read in recent days about the nuclear.
That's true. Yes. Thank you very much, both
Okay.
of you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
תודה רבה.